To start on time. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. We start all of our meetings. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We got the flag in the corner over here. So please stand if you like. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then we have our land acknowledgement. As we gather for this meeting, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akima A'odam, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still the home of many indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Okay, so before I go into the agenda for tonight, I'll remind everybody, if you have questions for Dr. Menzel, fill out the cards, and if we get through all the cards, then we can just take questions from the audience, but usually we can get through more that way because we have 15 minutes with him. So first up, we'll have our 15 minutes with Dr. Menzel, and then we have Dr. Amanda Burke. She's the Executive Vice President from the Center for Arizona's Future. That is a local organization that does a lot of research, and they have a big study that they have put together called the Arizona We Want. So she'll give us a little tidbit of that, and then actually next week we have a presentation that's a full hour focusing on that research. And then we have our featured speakers from SUSD talking about assessments, what assessments all of our children take. It's definitely testing season, why they take them, and when they do them. And we have Assistant Superintendent Kim Guerin and Dr. Cindy Bachna, the Assessments and Accountability Director. And then we have a few executive board updates and committee updates. And then if any SBC representatives have an announcement they would like to make, they are welcome to do so at the close of the meeting. So with that, we'll go to Dr. Menzel. Get my basket of cards. Perfect, thank you. Sitting, standing? You can sit, I don't care. Okay, I'm ready. Okay, DCS has many teacher jobs that need to be filled, but nothing is happening. Why is hiring happening in other campuses, but not ours? We feel we are losing out on hiring trained teachers.
So as we know of vacancies, those positions should be getting posted. I don't have anyone here from Human Resources and was not aware that there are vacancies that haven't been posted. I've talked to a number of principals that are in the process of interviewing, so I'll have to look into that one.
Okay, thank you. As a PTO president community member came to me with concerns that aren't always comfortable sharing up the chain. When they have serious concerns about our administration and are now upset about a survey, what can I tell them? What do we need to do to remove a principal?
Okay, so this is a loaded question. So
You got 14 minutes.
exactly. So let's talk very clearly. In Scottsdale, we believe that it's important to provide people with opportunities to improve if there are signs that there are challenges with respect to their performance. This is true for anyone in the organization, from a custodian and a paraprofessional to a classroom teacher to a building principal. So when we begin to hear concerns, we spend some time identifying what the nature of the concerns are, trying to determine, is it a one-off concern? Because we've had those. If you are a parent in a classroom, you know that there might be one parent who's really upset with the teacher and 29 parents who are really happy. That one person can make a lot of noise, but it may not be reflective of exactly what's going on in the classroom. So for us, it's really important to gather information to identify how we can provide support for our building level leaders. Our principals are supervised by assistant superintendents. There's a formal evaluation process that takes place every year. One of the things that we did this year that hasn't been in place recently is launch 360 feedback surveys, not for evaluation purposes, but to really understand what's happening in our buildings, to get a sense of where teachers and other support staff feel about a building leadership and issues and opportunities for improvement. Also to identify areas of strength, because what we want to do is reinforce the areas of strength and provide support in areas where building leaders can improve. We also will be starting again, after the COVID period, the Hanover Climate Survey, which allows parents, all of you, as well as our students and staff, to provide feedback with respect to the climate in our buildings, as well as across our district. So all of that information comes together to help us make informed decisions. But if the way we're going to operate as a school district is we get upset, and I will tell you that in one of the buildings that I know for sure, the 360 feedback did not reflect uniform opinion about building level leadership. There are mixed opinions about that, and I've had veteran teachers from one of the buildings tell me two different sides of the story. And so for us, if we're going to treat people fairly and help them improve, we have to follow a very thoughtful process, not just respond because some people feel very intensely about, they want someone different. And there may be a need for a change at some time. We don't always have the right people in the right seats on the bus, and we've made changes during the course of the past 2 years. But we are going to honor a process that's fair to our people.
Okay, thank you. What would the proposed new budget formula do for SUSD's funding and budget?
I'm not sure I know which new budget formula we're talking about because there have been a number of proposals. So we're talking about the governor's budget proposal, the grand bargain. Does anyone want to admit to that question so I can know which? So the 1269 that Michelle Udall was pushing, that one, so it's dead. That's the first thing. And it would have represented at least $2 million less for Scottsdale under that funding formula. Transportation was one of the big reasons why we would be losing money because of how we're able to collect local revenues for that. But there were some other formulaic things that would have negatively impacted Scottsdale. But that one is not gaining traction. There's not just one Republican senator, but at least 3 that I've been told oppose it, so it's not going to move forward. They didn't move forward today on a skinny budget, and so that means we're back to the drawing board. It's really unclear what's going to happen. Senator Boyer's working on a grand bargain with Senator Bowie. That one's interesting because it contains a lot of things that many people would like and a few things that different groups wouldn't like. So in the grand bargain that Boyer, you all know who Boyer is, right? Or do I need to provide? So Senator Boyer is a Republican. Before he got elected to the Senate, was a teacher at Veritas. He's going to go back to Veritas next year. Senator Boyer oftentimes has been a lone vote on any number of things, so he'll stand very firmly for what he believes in. One of the things he believes in strongly is expanding ESA options, but not for everyone, but for Title I students. So one of the things in the grand bargain is an expansion of ESA for Title I eligible students so that they would have that portability to choose a school that they wanted that could include a private or parochial option. That's one piece. He also believes that the voters were very clear that they wanted to increase funding for schools when they voted yes on 208. They didn't contemplate, from his perspective, the fact that there were going to be constitutional challenges and ultimately the Supreme Court ruling it was unconstitutional. So he believes we need to put more money into schools, and given the relatively healthy rainy day fund and revenue exceeding expectations, he's proposing $850 million more on an ongoing basis for schools versus the $200 million that's been carried forward in the budget based on the inflationary increase that's spelled out in the Constitution. 200 million, 850 million. What he wants in exchange is expansion of ESAs. The other thing, in order to make this work, is you have to fix aggregate expenditure limit, because if you don't fix AEL, having more money that you can't spend doesn't do any good. So that has to go to a vote of the people. The other thing that many people are unaware of, but will be an issue for us, is Prop 123. It came into effect in 2015, and some of you probably know the history better than I do, but long story short, again, the state was underfunding schools. This was a compromise solution that provided more funding for schools through 2025. So there's a cliff that's happening, and so there are 2 fixes that can help with the structural funding challenge for schools. The last piece is the one the governor wants. And what the governor wants is to move forward on the flat tax as quickly as possible. They can't get that on the ballot now until 2024. So the grand bargain includes things that schools would like, $850 million versus $200 million. It includes some things that some school people don't like, expanding ESAs, but it's a limited expansion, so it's balanced. Addressing AEL on 1, 2, 3 is a benefit to everyone, but moving to a flat tax more quickly impacts ongoing revenue, so it could create structural issues down the road. So you can make pros and cons for both. You're at a unique juncture where if there's ever going to be a grand bargain between two parties that are at polar extremes oftentimes on issues, this might be that opportunity. We don't know if that's the case, but that's what's been put forward, and Senator Boyer is working with Senator Bowie, a Democrat, to work on building a coalition to see if they can move it forward. Clock is ticking because they need to have a budget passed by June 30th. Does that help? Okay.
And we actually have a handout at the front of who your state legislature is, if you would like to contact your local legislator. That was all of my cards. Any other cards?
Any other questions? 4 minutes.
Okay.
I just want to again, yes, Susan. So we
Can you repeat the question into the microphone?
Okay, so,
Thank you.
So Dr. Karen Benson has been selected to serve as Associate Superintendent. There's some restructuring that's taking place, but it's still a work in progress. So I said at the governing board meeting when we hired her, one of the things that I wanted to change when I got here but needed to take the time to do it was we had 3 assistant superintendents, Dr. Guerin over Ed Service, Dr. Sakos over secondary, Dr. Hagegot over elementary. In my mind, there's a broad umbrella of teaching and learning. All 3 of those areas work together to advance a teaching and learning agenda for our students. And so my vision was to put an associate superintendent in place that oversees all of teaching and learning. So when Dr. Guerin accepted the job at Madison, congratulations, Kim, we had an opportunity to not replace her position, but to hire someone as an associate superintendent. So Dr. Benson will be filling that role. We know that our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Bowman, has indicated he's resigning at the end of the school year, so we'll have a position to fill there. There are a number of other positions. Some people are retiring. Some people are going back to districts that they came from. So like other districts, we have this revolving door, and so musical chairs, and the music hasn't stopped. So by June, we should have a much clearer picture of how that all plays out, but we are taking advantage of opportunities to reconfigure positions. There were concerns expressed when I first got here about being admin heavy and bloat and what predecessors had done with respect to that. We have eliminated all but one executive director title through attrition. So when people leave, we've gone from executive director to director, and sometimes we haven't replaced other layers within organizations. Special education is a case in point. Executive director, director, coordinator. We're eliminating the executive director position, are filling the director position with Dr. Brooke Williams, principal of Laguna, will be our new special ed director starting next year. We'll have 2 coordinators, or 3, Kim. 3, 1 lead coordinator, and 1 is kind of shifting down. So we're eliminating 1 administrative position there. So we've been right-sizing through attrition since I've been here, and we'll continue to look at what's the most efficient way to structure our organizational leadership in order to advance the vision and mission of Scottsdale Unified School District.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you all for your time. I know you're going to enjoy Amanda, and you'll enjoy Kim and Cindy's presentation. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we have Dr. Amanda Burke from the Executive Vice President for Center of Arizona's Future. I know it's a kind of weird room, so.
Okay. Tina, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Burke, and I'm here kind of in a couple different roles. One is I'm the executive vice president at a nonprofit called the Center for the Future of Arizona, and I'm also a mom of 2 little boys at Kiva Elementary School, kindergartner and a 2nd grader. I don't know if anyone else is here from Kiva tonight, but I can also be our parent rep because I'm part of our PTO and a room mom for both my kinder class and 2nd grade class as well. So I was so pleased when Tina reached out, and she's heard me share some of the findings that I'm going to share tonight, and just said, would you be able to give us just a preview leading up to one of the special sessions that I know this group holds, which is next week via Zoom. So this is just a little bit of a preview, and I'll share some key findings. So we can go to the next slide. The Center for the Future of Arizona. Oh, one other thing that I'll share too is that I'm also a former educator. So I was a classroom teacher for a number of years teaching high school English. So that's probably also relevant to know too. So the Center for the Future of Arizona, CFA for short, thank goodness, because that's a mouthful. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We're physically located in downtown Phoenix, but we work across the state. And what you see there on the slide, that's our mission. Our mission is to bring Arizonans together to create a stronger and brighter future for Arizona. That's a very broad mission. So how we do that is in 4 ways. One is first by listening to Arizonans to really try to understand what is it that Arizonans care most about, what's most important, and what do they want for the future. And that's really the part of what I'm going to be sharing today. We also then share trusted data. If we know what Arizonans care about, how are we actually doing on the issue areas? And we do that by sharing publicly available data that anyone could locate and find on their own. But we curate it and update it regularly through a set of tools that we call the progress meters so that communities, leaders, organizations such as the Parent Council can utilize that to be informed, drive conversation, but ultimately action. We work to get ideas into public dialogue and discussion, and then finally, when we were founded, which was by Dr. Laddie Kaur when he retired as president of ASU and co-founded by our current president, Dr. Sybil Francis, the idea was that we were going to be a do tank. We were not going to be an organization that simply produced a lot more of interesting reports that sit on a shelf, but actually collaborate and work with others to take promising ideas and get them into action to make a difference. So that's a little bit about us. We can go to the next slide. The vision that we hold up is something called the Arizona We Want, and that's informed by what we learn from Arizonans, what they care about. It's a vision that drives our work, but we also share it with others as a way to say we do have some common hopes and dreams and aspirations, and how do we come together to make that a reality over time. Next slide. As a do tank, we lead lots of initiatives and programs in education, workforce development, and civic engagement. We can go to the next slide. This is some of our impact, but while you're looking at these numbers, I'll share just a little bit about the kind of work we lead in education, just to give you a flavor of that. One is we know, and this relates to some of the questions that were raised earlier, that great schools have great leaders. You really can't have a great school without a great leader. So we contribute to that in Arizona by providing executive leadership development training for school leaders across the state. We're working with over 300 school leaders currently. We have career-connected pathways. How do we help young Arizonans as early in the middle grades explore careers, learn about what they are interested in, what they're not, work with schools to align course taking so that kids can earn college credit while in high school that lead to jobs that pay livable wages. And then we also have work in the space of personalizing education. How do we tailor learning to better meet the needs of every individual child and help them succeed? That sounds really easy to do, but it can be really challenging in practice. So we work alongside schools to support them and their teachers to be able to make those shifts. All that work is optional. It's available for schools and communities that want to partner and do that work together. So, but the real message that I wanted to share for tonight is recent findings from our latest decennial Gallup Arizona survey. So I said CFA tries to listen to Arizonans. We have found that the best way to do that is by going directly to Arizonans and asking them, what do you want? What do you care about? And what are the changes that you'd like to see? So 10 years ago, we partnered with the Gallup organization, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. They're arguably the gold standard when it comes to public opinion and public surveys, and designed the first survey of its kind actually in the country, which was designed to be a representative sample of a state to find out what the people who live there care about. So it had never been done before. We did it 10 years ago. A lot changes in a decade. It was time to go back and renew our understanding that would help continue to inform the Arizona we want. So I'm going to just share, these are the A little bit about the survey. It is, to our knowledge, the largest, most comprehensive survey of its kind. It went out to over 30,000 Arizonans with a sample size of 3,500 coming back. Just to give you a sense, most surveys that you read about in the news or hear on the TV have a sample size of 300 or 500 people. So this is significantly larger. We oversampled particular communities of color, rural Arizona, so that we could report out on the findings with confidence to say that it truly is representative of the communities. And it was a broad topic, broad survey of over 80 questions on a number of issue areas. So I'm just going to hit the highlights in terms of the major findings, and then I'll delve more deeply in the survey findings next week on Zoom. So the first finding is that we as Arizonans actually agree on the issues that are most important to Arizona's future. And that was an important finding because it really runs counter to the public narrative and the fractured media that we have. And I'll, in the next slide, share how we define that. So Gallup did the analysis, and what was decided is that consensus, when we say agree, what does that mean? Is that 50%? We defined it at 70% or more, and you can't get to levels of 70% agreement across all Arizonans unless you have high levels of agreement across political affiliation, across age, race, ethnicity, geography. Often in Arizona, there's conversation, well, like Tucson's so different than Phoenix, we couldn't possibly agree, on some of the same things. So it was set at a high bar, so we really could see where is there consensus. And what we found, in the next slide, is that we agree as Arizonans on 7 shared public values. And I do want to emphasize public. We're not talking about people's personal values. These are statements that really were about Arizona. And as Arizonans, what do we care about? Here's the full set. Just given time, I want to be respectful of your agenda and won't delve into all of them. But you can see the issue areas: education, health and well-being, jobs, environment, civic engagement, fair, just, and equitable systems, and immigration reform. And I also want to say that it doesn't mean that Arizonans agree on everything. So you might be surprised to see immigration reform on the list of shared public values. When we asked Arizonans how important is this issue and what are the things you'd like to see, where there was agreement is around the idea of comprehensive immigration reform, including a pathway to citizenship and support for dreamers, who are young people who were brought often to Arizona or to America as kids and have grown up but don't have legal status. There's much less agreement on issues of border security, for example. So I just want to be really clear that when we're talking about agreement, we're very specific about looking at the data on specific actions where there was agreement. Next slide. So that's a segue. Arizonans want action. We don't just want as Arizonans to talk about ideals. We really want to see things happen. So for each of those shared public issue areas, we asked a whole slate of key issues, and they were all framed around a 10-year horizon. Over the next 10 years, how important is it to you, and then there was the question. There are more than 40 action statements that had 70% or more consensus. Again, really, really high consensus in public surveys. And these are just a few of the examples. Next slide. And the third major finding, so the first is we agree more than we disagree. The second is we want action on some very specific things. And the third, and I imagine that this will resonate with many in the room, we also have gaps between this idea of the Arizona we want and what we have today. So while we may agree on the future direction we want to go, how Arizonans are experiencing life today varies. And we do have areas of opportunity and gaps to be able to address, and some of those are highlighted here. So the last thing I'll do is just give you a sneak preview on the education findings. Next week, I'm planning to go into detail, much more detail on education, including providing some more nuanced data specific to Scottsdale Unified School District. And I'll also touch on health, jobs, and civic engagement and leadership, because none of these issues exist in a vacuum. Our education system is very tightly tied to what's happening in workforce and health and well-being, and as we talked about with the budget, what's happening with leadership in our communities and state as well. So education, the next slide. We asked Arizonans, to what extent do you agree with each of these statements here? And I'll read them because it may be hard to see from where you're sitting. The first is, every student in Arizona deserves an excellent education, really regardless of personal or family circumstance. 89% of Arizonans agree with that statement. Second, and this is what formed the basis of the shared public value, 84% agree that a highly educated and skilled population is good for Arizona. Sometimes there's discussion around, do Arizonans even value education? This really reaffirms, yes, it is a core public value. More money ties again to the conversation. This survey was fielded after Prop 208 passed. So even after Prop 208, you still had 70% of Arizonans saying more money needs to be invested in our public education system. And then you see on the far end, yet while Arizonans want excellence and equity, there are significant concerns about overall quality. So these questions were about the quality of public education in Arizona. So often in surveys, when you ask about public education in your child's school, the answers are often different. So I do just want to point out it's a statewide view. Next slide. Just to contextualize it a little bit, I mentioned the progress meters that we have that provide data. The first one that we launched, which we did in collaboration with another organization called Education Forward, also a nonprofit, also nonpartisan, is something called the Arizona Education Progress Meter. This is not data from the Gallup findings. This is data that we regularly update each year. And the indicators, which are P20, they start with quality early childhood and complete with attainment, the percentage of Arizonans that have a trade or technical certificate, 2-year degree or 4-year degree. And then there are goals for each one of these. The process of identifying the indicators for the progress meter and the goal setting was a very broad, inclusive process that included educators, education associations, business leaders, public policy makers, and these were launched about 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, we launched the progress meter. It's been adopted formally, for example, by the State Board of Education. Many municipalities, many cities and towns have adopted these goals. Michelle Udall, who was mentioned earlier, has used this as chair of the Education Committee as a framework to determine what bills are heard, so it's used as a nonpartisan tool. But the point here is when you look at where we are on these measures, we do have a ways to go towards reaching the goals. It is the case that the pandemic impacted student success on every part of the continuum, and we had some significant challenges before. So the impact is about 2 to 3 percentage points. We were trending in the right direction. We've taken a dip. That's consistent with every state across the country. Next slide. We're able to share the progress meter data by county, by city, by school district, and by individual school where the data is available. So I just wanted to share one slide on Scottsdale Unified School District data. Again, this is publicly available data. The third grade reading is the percentage of Arizona third graders who reach proficient on the state standardized English language arts assessment. 8th grade, same thing. It's the percentage of 8th graders who reach proficient on the standardized math assessment, and we get the data directly from the Arizona Department of Education. We have a data sharing agreement. Post-high school enrollment is the percentage of high school graduates who immediately enroll that next semester in some form of post-secondary, trade or technical, 2-year, 4-year, and then high school graduation. So I think there's some major points of pride for Scottsdale Unified School District in this data in terms of clearly outperforming the county and the state, has already beat the goal of the education progress meter in high school graduation, and some opportunities to continue to improve. And again, I will share some of this data in next week, including disaggregated by populations of students, race, ethnicity, income. And the data doesn't answer questions, it really provides an opportunity to ask. Next slide. And then this is my last major slide, is just to preview the actions that Arizonans support. So while we we do have work to do to continue to improve quality, there is strong support for a number of actions that are research-based, that can move the needle for all kids. Right at the top, with 92%, which was the highest, one other action item in environment was tied at 92%. The highest amount of support was great teachers and great leaders in every school. Right behind that, increasing the number of students that continue their education beyond high school. And one of the things that's encouraging to me is that many of these actions reaffirm work that has been happening in communities, and that, for example, and that the state has been working on as well. So we have an attainment goal in Arizona, Achieve 60, perhaps, I don't know if you've heard of that, saying 60% of Arizonans need to have a degree or credential. That second action helps reinforce that. So it's not to say that it, is taking us off course. It, I think, really reaffirms a lot of work that's happening at many levels. Next slide. That's a comprehensive full set, and I have an executive summary that I can leave if it's of interest to you. And then the last slide is this one, which I'd like to leave you with, which is when you look at the Arizona we want, the shared public values, and the specific action items, they really aren't assigned to any one particular leader or one particular community to get done. Yes, there are a few of them that the legislature is better positioned to lead on than others, but many of them are actions that communities like here in Scottsdale can lead on and continue to further the work. And so part of the message that our center has been sharing is that it really is up to each of us in whatever seats we're in as leaders and as community members, and I know many of us wear different hats, but to be able to find the ways that we can come together to build a stronger and brighter future. And we intentionally framed the findings around where we have consensus as opposed to where we don't have agreement, not to be overly optimistic or Pollyannish about it, but really recognizing that it is a strategic move to focus on where we have agreement so that we can move forward, as opposed to spending a lot of time duking it out on the wedge issues where we're really far apart. The message we have here is over 40 long-term actions to have consensus on. There's a lot of hope in that, and I think there's a lot of productive work and conversations that can come. All of this data we have available on our website in a full report. If any of you are interested or connected with organizations or communities and you would like a briefing, we can curate the data and share it by geography, by different demographic groups. We're here to be of service and share the information. And thank you again. And I'm so grateful as a parent at Kiva for the work that you all do as the parent council, and certainly to our leaders in the school district. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was wonderful. So as she mentioned, next Wednesday, same time at 6 p.m., she will have an hour-long presentation where she'll go into more detail. That is on Zoom. And later when we do our SBC updates, I have the link to sign up to that and a QR code that you can register for that Zoom as well. So next up, we have Dr. Sydney Bachna and Dr. Kim Guerin.
Thank you so much. So we're going to stick with the theme, but I'm going to start with a little quiz. So my name is Dr. Kim Guerin. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and I support the assessment department. So I grew up in Arizona, was on the Wallace and Ladmo show, did not win a Ladmo bag. How many of you remember the standardized tests you took in elementary school? Does anyone know what the CAT stands for? California Achievement Test. What's another one that you remember taking? ISTEP. How about Iowa? Did anyone remember Iowa? Is it TOS? Texas. I have heard about that one. What about any millennials that took Ames, maybe? No, we're all different. Any other tests? So assessment has come a long way, When I was in school, it was about earning a grade, right? Really, really hard to earn that grade, and about some standardized test scores. So we still have that, but now we work for a balanced assessment system. And what's really important to us as educators, especially with the disruption in learning, is assessment that informs instruction. So if I'm a teacher and I know I deliver a lesson and I know right away who got the lesson, who got it a little bit, and who's way behind, then I can change and alter my instruction, individualize it, and make decisions to make sure that students can move forward, not just stand, deliver, and move on. That's what we want. So though we still have report cards and grades, and they're important, and we still have standardized tests so we can do some comparative data, we also have other assessments that are formative, summative. Dr. Bachna is going to get into the ABCs of that. When, why, and how things keep changing in Arizona, which makes her job very interesting. So welcome, Dr. Cindy Bachna.
Thank you. Dr. Guerin, do you mind moving my slides for me? Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy Bachna, for those of you who haven't met me before. I've actually been the Director of Assessment and Accountability here in Scottsdale for 4 years, and before that, I was the Director of Assessment in Mesa, which is huge, for 7 years. So coming to Scottsdale, even though you guys are a big district, a little bit smaller than Mesa. Mesa was about 70,000 students at one point when I was working there. So anyway, with that, let me get into what Dr. Guerin just kind of mentioned. Just to start with, assessment overview. What are the types of assessment? So the big 2 categories we think of for assessment are formative assessment and summative assessment. As your students progress through the system here, if they start with us in preschool and go all the way through 12th grade, they'll pretty much be exposed to all of these different types of assessment. Looking at formative assessment, the purpose of those assessments is to identify gaps in student learning. And these are the things where we look at our benchmark tests, our homework assignments, low-stakes group work that takes place in-class discussions, surveys, and self-assessment. So these are the kind of things that go on a daily basis in your classrooms with the teachers kind of evaluating where the students are at, where they could use some help to move forward. We also get into summative assessments, which are the more formal assessments that evaluate student learning. Those are our standardized tests, which we're all going through right now with the Arizona State testing. Final projects, final essays, final presentations. You can see the terminology is final, final, final. So your final report cards at the end of the quarters, and your final grades for your secondary students. So those are the 2 big categories. Go ahead. So let's take a minute to look at our general education. These are our district assessments. And these are the things that take place in different levels. The color coding is just to differentiate the levels. There's no meaning to it. Your kindergarten through 5th graders across the board on all campuses are taking the FastBridge benchmarks. Those are pretty much new this year. We used the English ones last year towards the 2nd semester, but we did not use them with math until this school year. They're given in English and math, and they're given 3 times a year. They're given first in August, then in December and January for the winter session, and finally in May. And we use that information, and I'll get into how that's used in the next slide. But wait just a second. For middle school, we have English benchmarks through School City. And those are teacher-designed benchmarks that we've been using for a few years now. And we give those at the end of the quarters, so 1st, 2nd, and 3rd quarter. They're aligned to our curriculum maps and aligned to our curriculum as the students progress through the curriculum. For math, we have the iReady benchmarks. Those are adaptive tests that your students take in middle school online on their own. So they actually, as the students take it, they can get harder items or easier items depending on how they're doing on the assessment. We give those tests 3 times a year as well. August, December, January, and May. So you see a trend. We have a lot of 3 times a year assessments. You'll also see that in our district assessments, we avoid April right now because that's when all the state testing is taking place. In 9th to 11th grade this year, we introduced the pre-ACT assessments through Horizon. We're using those because the state assessment for high school now is the ACT. And so these are giving the students practice on ACT items before they get to that high school 11th grade ACT. We give those at the end of each quarter. So how do we use the data? First, let's think about our students. We use it for acceleration, identifying students that can move ahead based on how they're doing on these assessments. We use it for differentiated instruction, to identify things that students could use more practice with or work with different groups. We use it for individualized intervention, again, to look at the tiers that the students fall into and where they could use additional support. And we also use our tests to identify students that could be helped by our summer school programs. We have a vast number of summer school programs, and we look at all this information to say, who should we be reaching out to and inviting for summer school? Our teachers also are using all these information from these assessments to monitor and adjust instruction. They review and calibrate their lesson plans based on the assessment data that they get back, and they use it to collaborate with their peers in professional learning communities. They like to look at the things that they're seeing in their data, as far as their students are doing, and see if there's things that they could learn from their peers, what they could teach better, or help a peer that might have lower test scores to identify what the lessons could be done to be done better. Finally, we look at our administrators. They also look at the data. They reflect on current and success and potential areas for improvement. They review their campus practices surrounding instruction. They evaluate the curriculum and curriculum maps that happens with the principal groups at this MDA and also with the teaching and learning department. And they too collaborate with their peers. They like to see how other schools are doing in comparison to themselves so they can talk and say, what's a success on your campus? What can we learn from each other? So the state assessments, this is a general education overview, and this is the history of our state assessments that Dr. Karen kind of just referred to in terms of some of the stuff we've been doing over time. Back in 2015, we adopted the AZ Merit Test. That was an acronym meaning measurement to inform teaching. In English and math in grades 3 through 11, we also had the AIM Science Test, and that was started back in 2010. And you can see the grade levels for the AIM Science are fewer. They gave it in 4th, 8th, and 11th grade. 1920 school year, all the state assessment testing was canceled because that was the quarter we were all at home because of the pandemic. In 2021, which is last school year, the name of AZ Merit changed to AZM2. Basically the same content. The testing grade levels changed slightly. We went from an 11th grade test to a 10th grade test for that year in English and math. And we first gave the AZ Sci, which is our new science test, for grades 5, 8, and 11. So that's updated to the current science standards. This year, right now, your students are taking the AASA, which replaced the AZM2, which replaced the AZ Merit. It's funny.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yes. The AASA stands for Arizona Academic Standards Assessment. In English and math, grades 3 through 8, essentially the same standards are being measured in the same ways as the previous AZM2 and AZ Merit. There's one new thing this year. They're introducing a fluency measure for 3rd graders. And so your 3rd graders are going through a field test right now where they're listening to items and responding on an English, like a fluency measure. The high schoolers, ACT Aspire is given in the 9th grade. It's kind of like a pre-ACT. That covers English, math, reading, and science. And then the ACT is the 11th grade test in English, math, reading, and science. Now, interestingly enough, the ACT science test does not specifically cover the Arizona standards. So because of state law, your 11th graders actually have to take another science test called AZ Sci that covers the Arizona standards. So your 11th graders are taking 2 science tests, one through the ACT and one through the state. First time. Good question. Sometime this summer. Usually we get paper reports back in the summer that we can give to parents in August. We give them back to the schools. So I anticipate data this summer. I think it's been administered in the past. I don't know that states are currently using it. It's kind of been a twilighted test, the ACT Aspire, but due to our state laws about testing, we do have to have a 9th grade assessment. Go ahead. So I'm the accountability person too. So I just wanted to mention to you briefly the accountability piece of all this, which is kind of why during April, your teachers and your principals are more stressed and concerned about your students being at school and getting tested. There's laws surrounding this. The schools have to test 95% of the students to make sure that we're not picking and choosing which children that should be tested. And so because of that, they're much more making sure the students all are taking the assessments. Ultimately, the test scores are used to assign schools a letter grade. Now, the last time the letter grades were given was in the 2018-2019 school year, because 1920 was the pandemic where everything was no testing, and last year they gave a grace year. But this year, there's no grace year. This year, there's going to be letter grades assigned to our schools in the fall. Generally speaking, our schools do very well. I think the last time we had this in 18-19, 18 of our 29 schools that got letter grades received an A, Seoul being the one school that wasn't evaluated on the system. So it will be interesting to see how we do this year. There's a number of different things that go into this letter grade, but the predominant part of the letter grade is the state assessment data. So it's high stakes. Yes? Not through the system. It's a school-based letter grade. They do that, but there also is there's a whole observation piece that's part of the evaluation system for teachers that incorporates data, but also incorporates classroom observations, and the principals and APs handle that part. So it's a variety of information. It can be. This is much more formalized, but it's not at the teacher level. No. Not formalized, no. That was it for me, actually, so you're right in the questions. Anything else? Yes?
Well, I just want to comment at our school, there's supposed to be a good cost
Any other questions? You have to speak into the microphone.
No one wants to speak in the microphone. I don't blame you.
Okay, are you presenting as well? Or oh, yes.
Many of you know I'm leaving at the end of June, and it's with a heavy heart because so many of you served on so many of my committees that we did together to keep the schools open during the pandemic, to create all the different models to help keep kids safe. And we worked countless hours, and I see many of you in the room who spent so much time with me on Zoom and Teams and problem solving and figuring it out. And it was one of the most challenging periods of my career, and I think all of us as moms too, and dads and grandparents. So I just want to say thank you for spending all that time with me and trusting me and problem solving with me so we can get our kids back in person learning, which is safely, which is what we needed. So sincerely, thank you for all your support over these past 3 years.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Guerin. And thank you, Dr. Bachna. So all of these slides will be on our website. All of our meetings, the full presentation from the meeting is posted on our website. So all of that data you can go back and look at, and the tables and everything that Dr. Bachna had as well. Oops, hold on a second. Let me go back to mine. Okay, so executive board updates. I forgot a few slides, but our budget report, this is our monthly budget report. The only changes were we had some additional other donations, which were some grants, and then we had one expense, which was interpretation services. And then here's the event that I mentioned. So next Wednesday at 6 p.m. on Zoom, that is how you can register. We will send an email out as well through our MailChimp with that information. And I think I forgot my other slides. Okay, so the two very important things I need to mention. Nominations for the SBC Executive Board are open now. It's been open for about a week and a half, and we have one more week. So on all of the tables are flyers about that. There's a full flyer that lists all of the positions, and then the smaller flyer has a QR code that goes to the form, and that includes how to apply, and then it also links to our website that gives a full description of all the positions. So an executive board term is 1 year, and any parent or guardian is eligible. We love to have as much representation from across the district as possible. That's kind of the most important thing. Any Spanish speakers or bilingual speakers is very important as well. So please take a look and consider it. It's not a huge commitment. We have our board is anywhere, many of the positions can have 2 people in them. So the board is anywhere from 8 people at a minimum up to 15 people. So it's absolutely a shared workload. We just meet once a month as an executive board, and then we attend the general meetings once a month as well, and then each position can, work together to do their tasks on their own time. So please take a look and consider it, and encourage any other parents that they're interested in getting involved district-wide. It's a really great opportunity. And then our next general meeting is May 18th. That is our last one of the year. And what we're going to do is similar to what we did last year, where we have highlights from each of the individual school campuses. So you should have received an email from myself or from Kathy Samuels requesting that you put together 1 or 2 slides for your school and work in collaboration with your other rep or your principal. If I don't hear from the reps, I'll reach out to the principals as well. That highlights, and it could really be anything. It could be one main event, it could be one little thing, it could be as much as you can jam into 2 slides as possible. That's fine, but it's really awesome to see what's going on at all the different campuses. And then at that meeting, the reps can present their slide to just speak for 1 or 2 minutes about it, or if someone from the school isn't available to attend, then one of us from the board can speak to it as well. So we'll continue to keep reaching out to you. I think I set a deadline of May 4th-ish in order to get those back. And that will be May 18th at 9 a.m. That's an in-person meeting. And let me see if I have any other slides. Oh, and then we have SBC rep announcements. So we know I have one here today, and then I have one that someone sent me as well. So I have one from Mojave Middle School, Ms. Karen Gifford.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, I'm Karen Gifford. My child goes to Mojave Middle School. He's in 6th grade. And we've been in the district since pre-K at some great schools, a couple of different elementary schools before Mojave. But when I got to Mojave, I realized they're really doing PBIS. And they really engage with families and partner with them. My son has some special learning needs, and it's been hard to get those addressed at times. But at Mojave, it's easy, it's really responsive. So I wrote this conference proposal for the Association for Positive Behavioral Support International Conference, and I brought our principal and school psychologist and talked about what they do at Mojave. That's so cool. So it was amazing, and we had 100 people. So spreading the good word.
That's awesome. Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. And then I had heard from the representatives from Chaparral. They were not able to attend tonight, but they wanted to share that they have some of their students and parents are helping with the Tonalea Carnival on May 6th, so they have a Sign Up Genius if you're interested in helping with that. And she said they're planning their teacher appreciation, so I guess that means at her school, at Chaparral. Any other reps have any announcements? Okay. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and hopefully we'll see you on the 27th at our next meeting with Amanda Burke.